Well, as you know, our theme is going right in a culture that has gone wrong. And a few moments ago, we all nodded our head in agreement that we think things have gone wrong. And to be fair, I think culture has always gone wrong when it has not had its eyes on the person of Jesus Christ. I think we'd all agree with that. That when Jesus Christ is at the centre of all that we do, as a people and in society as a whole, things do change and do go right. Only a little while ago, I heard, not for the first time, about how King George VI called the nation to prayer. And they prayed, and guess what? You know the rest. But you see, that's the thing. In that moment, people were orientated to Jesus Christ. And the sadness for me these days is that, unfortunately, in spite of a wonderful moment in history such as that, I think people have got further and further away from the truth of Jesus Christ. So when people are in need of comfort, which is what Psalm 23 is really about, and the theme for tonight, where do they go? I think often people go to lots of different things, but not to the Lord. I think people go out there for maybe the gambling, perhaps, just putting the TV on when they've had enough and they just sit there and be absorbed by it. There could be the drugs and all sorts of different things that people involve themselves with. So many people have relationships one after another because they are so desperate for comfort. Wouldn't we agree? But you know, we don't need to turn to other things. We just need to turn to Jesus Christ. And that may sound very, very simplistic. And you and I know, because life is not always straightforward for us, that actually it is simplistic, but actually having a focus and an orientation purely on him is not always the easiest thing to do. Now, how many of you know what one of my favourite pastimes is? The stars. So people are pointing up. I thought pointing to God. That's good. That's right. Yeah. Stars. I do astrophotography. And I had the telescope out last night, in part, in spite of being exhausted after the induction service. And you know what? It clouded over. So there you are. This is what happens. But let me just tell you something about my telescope, which I just thought I might say. It's not anything I've prepared at all. But I have in my telescope, in my mount, something called a polar scope. And the idea is this, that you look through it and break your neck in the process, and you make sure that you get the pole star, the North Star, smack in the middle of this little tiny circle, which is also on another circle. And that if you can get it as smack bang on as possible, then you've got what they call great polar alignment. And someone once said to me, I thought polar alignment was little bears in the North Pole standing next to each other. And I said, no. It's actually about the telescope. Please, sir, I said, don't be so rude. Okay. So polar alignment. And when you've got that really, really good, it then means you can start doing your photography. Because when that is absolutely smack bang on, then you can do long minute exposures and try and take a picture of something like galaxies or whatever. And it struck me that this is the thing here. Our lives are given to us by our God. And if we want to have true life, then we need to be, as it were, a smack bang on the pole star on Jesus Christ as much as possible. And whenever we drift off, as is the case with some of my pictures, you get wobbles and all sorts of problems. But when you are absolutely aligned to him, then we get somewhere. And hopefully one day I might show you one or two photos that are worth showing you. So I want to say tonight, orientation to the living God is so important. And in fact, the God that Psalm 23 describes. So how should we approach him? We approach him in this way. The Lord, our God, is my shepherd. Now, we've read that several times tonight. My shepherd. We think of ourselves together tonight, but for a moment, my shepherd. Mine. My personal, intimate shepherd. The focus is on you and not everyone else for a moment. This is about your God to you as you are, no matter how your day is, no matter what's gone on, whether you're feeling happy or sad, he is your shepherd. This is what David wrote. But here's the thing. How many of us here are shepherds? Anybody at all? How about 150 years ago? Do you think we might, well, the church wasn't here then, of course, but if they had been, do you think we might have had a few more shepherds maybe in the area? Yeah? Well, the thing is, you see, we don't know a lot about shepherding, if I'm honest, but we probably know even less about shepherding in ancient times, certainly in biblical times. And funnily enough, if you went to the Middle East today, you would see some of these practices still going on. So what I'm going to do is read out a few facts to you about what happened with ancient biblical shepherding. Do you think that would be of interest? Because I think it's going to hopefully expand our thinking tonight. In ancient Middle Eastern times, shepherds would name each of their sheep. Isn't that wonderful? You know, we have our pets and stuff, although Nikki won't let me have a cat, but that's beside the point. But the reality is, we name our pets. And in a sense, these sheep were so important to the shepherd, really important. It was their bread and butter, really. They would name each one of them. And here's the thing, they would also count them every single evening, which obviously then makes a little bit of an interest on when Jesus says about the 99 sheep and one goes wandering off. You can see why that's such an important thing to know. Remarkably, shepherds were able to know which sheep was which just by touching their face. Don't you think that's incredible? Oh, it's amazing. And they could do it even when blindfold. I find that an astonishing thing. They were also able to distinguish a lamb from amongst all the noise and clamour of the other sheep and return it to its mother even at night. And here's my astronomy plug again. Back in ancient times, there were no street lights. We're talking about pitch black, total darkness. And the shepherd could just find that little lamb, you know, it's a sweet image, isn't it? And just take it back to its mum. Amazing. Shepherds would also endanger their own lives to save a single sheep and then carry it on its shoulders, on the shoulders, back to the thing. Isn't that a wonderful image, again, of just those sort of the two legs there and the two legs there of the shepherd carrying? And that sheep, when it goes astray from the flock, would obviously be utterly helpless in every sense. And so it's very important for the shepherd and the sheep never to be apart, but to be one together. And what is even more amazing is this, is that many different flocks of sheep would regularly mix together, therefore separating them out was an absolute necessity. They'd have certain areas in fields and all the flocks would mingle together, but to separate them out was very, very important. So what would happen is this, each shepherd would make some noise like, or whatever the shepherds did, I don't know, and the sheep of his particular, group would come and follow him. No other sheep would do it. And if anybody's ever tried to mimic the call of that shepherd, those sheep would just ignore him. Isn't that incredible to think that he could just make that sound and they would always go to that shepherd? Shepherds also spent significant time with their sheep, even sleeping in the same field at night to protect them. And when guiding them, they would do it not always from the front, but from their side and indeed from their rears as well, gathering any stragglers, protecting them from an attack. So isn't that a wonderful image of just these different sheep as they are, and the shepherd knows where they all are all the time, and he does everything he can to keep them together as one group. So, with that in mind, the Lord is your shepherd. Let me make it clear to you. You may feel desperately alone at the minute. You may feel that no one understands you. You may feel you've got nothing going for you. You may feel that the world has come falling down upon you. Or, in contrast, you could feel absolutely brilliant. But the truth is this. God, the Lord, is your shepherd. And you are not on your own. You belong to him. And he loves you. He cares for you. He protects you. He finds you. When you go wandering off, he will go all the distance to pick you up and carry you on his shoulders, and he'll bring you back to where everybody else is so that you belong again as one group of people. Don't you think that's brilliant? Think of that. The Lord is your shepherd. And the Lord cannot be anything else. And I'll tell you why. Because Lord, in capital letters, as we know, comes from the Hebrew word Yahweh. And Yahweh means, I am who I am, and I will be who I will be. God cannot be anything else other than your shepherd. Always, that is who he is. And there is such hope in that, because you don't know what tomorrow brings any more than I do. All I know about is what's happened today, even yesterday, but I have no clue about tomorrow any more than you do. But he knows, and he is consistently the always God who does not change. He is your shepherd today, tomorrow, and will be in all the years ahead. And so I say hallelujah. Because if we're in a world where people need comfort, and if we're in a culture that has gone wrong, then surely it is right and best when we turn to God, we give our lives over to him, we become figuratively one of his sheep, and we let him shepherd us into those things that are now and ahead. I don't think there's a safer pair of hands to be in than Jesus Christ's. That's my hope, and it is our hope. But here's the thing. We've talked about the individual sheep, but you know the term the Lord was also applied to obviously Israel as a whole, and the term shepherd was also applied to Israel as a whole as well. And so therefore, my friends, we are all sheep together, if you see what I mean. If you're a true believer in Jesus Christ, you are his sheep together. And God cares for you individually just as much as he does for the person next to you. One of the things I've found in church life is there's always people who think that person over there is way more spiritual than me. Do you know what? I don't listen to that sort of stuff. Every single one who is born again of the Lord is spiritual because of Jesus Christ. And every single one matters to Jesus just as much. After all, John 10, he's the good shepherd. And we could say a bit more about that, couldn't we, tonight? But then we're getting out of our text. So he's there for you, he's there for us, and we belong to him. An ABC. Here is an ABC, really. Something very simple. Know that God, your Lord, is shepherding us as a church. He never lets go. Truth is, you know, when we think about the history of the church so far, and where we've all got to, and how I've been here for nearly, just over 3 weeks, I think it is, although that, according to Paul, didn't count. But it does, of course. The truth of the matter is this. God has taken us all on a journey together, and he's brought us together. And you're not here by chance, you're here for a reason, because the Lord is your shepherd, and he is our shepherd. Amen. The term shepherd, though, interestingly enough, was also given to the kings in ancient times. So King David was also called a shepherd of his people. So as that is so, and bearing in mind that Jesus is also the good shepherd, we could say that Jesus is the Messiah, King, shepherd, if you like, put it all together. And of course, as he cares for you intimately, he's also the one who has total charge, total power as the King of Kings over you and over me. So whilst we've got this intimate language of caring and nurturing and all those things, let us never lose sight of the fact that he is on a throne, the greatest of thrones, and what he says as that king is the most important thing of all. Because whilst that intimate language does us good, it is so good to know, on top of that, that as that king, he is the one who has all rule, all charge over all of our lives, however we may feel. You see, we may say we need this as an individual, and we may say we need that as a church, but the Lord is the God who is the shepherd who provides our wants, gives us our needs, not necessarily our wants, because he is, as the king, knows what we really do need, don't you think? I think sometimes it's very easy to assume that this and that is right, but let us listen to the voice of God. Let us listen to the voice of Jesus Christ the shepherd, because as his sheep, we do know his voice really. We just need to listen and know. So he helps us to lie down in green pastures. What a beautiful image. In the place of life, whether it's a life of ease or whether it isn't, what God always grants in the midst of any of it, adversity or otherwise, is himself. You will always find something in Jesus, something in your Lord, even if you cannot see anything else. If you are totally overwhelmed, know this: if you spend time with your shepherd, he will give you what you need. He will give you what you need. And if you can't do it on your own, I just feel this is a prophetic thing to say. And it's obvious, but I think it's a prophetic thing to say. If you are so down in yourself and you cannot do it, then let the other sheep come and help you. We're a body together. Very, very important we understand that. And the body of Christ can easily bicker, but I tell you this: we are here to love one another through the love that God has given us first, and then love the world out there. I think it's so, so important. So let him guide us in those paths of righteousness, those paths that are right, holy and good. Why are they right? Because they're God-determined paths. They're the ones he wants. They're the ones that he knows are best, verse 3. And he always does it for his name's sake. And that little phrase, name's sake, is really important because it's about his character, it's about his authority, it's about who God actually really is. So let God be the determiner of those right paths. All we need to know is he can use his rod, he can use his staff, and he can nudge us and move us like any good shepherd would, that we in turn then follow him in what he has given for us to do. When would you say that you have most often heard this psalm read? I knew you were going to say that. Let me ask you a question. Do you think this psalm really is only for funerals? No. It's funny, isn't it? As you know, I had what you could call a vocational career of sorts between ministries where I did a lot of funerals for a lot of people in Aylesbury and Aston Clinton. And it was extraordinary. Sometimes I'd park in, say, Tesco car park just out of the blue, and somebody would walk past in front of them. I'd done a service for them the other week, and they go, "Hello, Simon." I say, "How are you doing?" or whatever else. And you get these bonds with people. It's very interesting. But almost every time they'd say, "Can we have Psalm 23 at the funeral?" Every time. Well, let me say this. This psalm is about living, not just dying. It's about now, the God who shepherds in the present and, of course, in the future. And that phrase, the valley of the shadow of death, it's one of those phrases so many people have heard. But let me assure you, there are several translations for it, and here's the first one. Darkest valley, total darkness, or even very deep shadow. And you know what? The truth is this. We can have very deep shadows and darkness and darkest valleys in our everyday lives, can we not? Let's be honest. I think sometimes as a church we say Jesus is wonderful and brilliant and everything else, and he absolutely is, hallelujah. But being a Christian is not the easiest of things. But God is great and God is good, and he always is. And the Christian people sometimes go through the most tremendous things, the deepest of shadows. But I want you to know, he is still the shepherd even then. Even then, when evil strikes, when worst case scenario falls on you, he will lead you from the place of wilderness that you may feel you're in into the promised land, whatever that may be ahead, just as he did with the time of the Exodus. So he takes you, he guides you and brings you through. So let his rod, that rod of authority, touch you, guide you. Let it rescue you. Let it protect you. The staff that he holds, which is used also for supporting you, let it be a reassurance and a comfort to you, verse 4. You see, the reality is this. I, in my life, many times have been through some stuff, and believe me, when you get to know me a bit more, you may be surprised. I have been through some major things in my life. And I want to say to you that there have been many times when I could have said, God, you are no longer blessing me. There is nothing you are doing that I can see that is anything of you. All I can feel is the deep shadow. And I want to tell you this, that sometimes when we're in that place, first of all, we don't recognise the blessing. That's the first thing, because we're so locked up. But I think also the second thing is also this, that sometimes when we're going through it and the enemy is absolutely banging on the door of our lives and we can't see anything else, do you know what sometimes we can easily conclude? We can conclude that because it's so bad, God can no longer bless me. Let me make it clear. A table can be laid in front of your enemies. A 6-course meal can be given to you of blessing, even when it is so bad and you don't know what to do with yourself. And I think it's so important we realise that the enemy, life, the world is not capable of stopping God's blessing on your life, even when everything is so tough. Do you hear me when I say that, my friends? Because I'll be honest with you now, thinking about this as I'm preaching, if we are going to move into a time of change together, then the enemy is not going to like where we're going. He won't. Believe me. I had a major battle just the other day. There was some things going on at home and various things. And it was before I did that sermon on the bread of life. Yeah? And I said to God, I just do not know how to do this tomorrow morning. I'll be honest with you. I just don't know how to do it. And I had some people praying for me. And there you are. God turned up. And God did what God would do. Because it's not about me, it's about him. And the table of blessing remains. Please do not lose sight of that fact. And if you're unsure what your blessing might be, just for a moment, turn and say, Jesus, let me see what you see today. What is it you are giving me today that is of blessing? Funnily enough, Bernie, a friend of mine from my previous church, was there yesterday, and she said to me, Simon, write a journal, and every day just put 3 things in it that you can be grateful for as you're going along. And she said, at the end of the day, look back at that and say, God, I thank you for the fact I've got a wife, I've got my daughter Emily, what a voice, beautiful thing, and I've got Anaya, and indeed, let's be honest, we've got each other. What a blessing that is, really, isn't it? Yeah. And let's be honest, there's loads of other things. You see, we're not going to be in want. Jesus provides spiritually. He also provides for us physically. We have bread, we have food. We have so much, don't we? We really do. So let's try and remember those things, because the God we know is into restoring and refreshing your soul, your souls. Verse 3. He restores your life. Always, he finds a way, and he keeps you alive, verse 3, now and in the future. And at the heart of this psalm, as far as the Hebrew kind of Hebraic stanzas of the verses are concerned, are these words, right in the middle, you comfort me. You comfort me. You and I, therefore, shall not be in want. We shall lack nothing, because Jesus Christ always gives exactly what we need, even though it may not necessarily be, as I said earlier, what we want. In the midst of our lives, there is always our God himself. And we do not have to worry. We do not have to be afraid, because he is always interested in his sheep. We're always on his mind, and he cares so much. He is the sufficient one for all our needs. So, this psalm, I think, is radical, really radical. Because if he really is this shepherd, and he really is the one who is sufficient, then do you know what? We don't have to trust the world. We don't have to trust in ourselves, in our own devices. We have to trust him for everything. Ultimately, it's God who provides, isn't it? Really? It's totally radical, this. Because actually, how many of us truly believe God is a shepherd, and in fact, may I add, to this degree, that he is so able that he can provide everything we really do need? To me, that is absolutely counter-culture. It's the opposite the way the world thinks. They turn to themselves and lots of other things. And let's be honest, if we're honest with ourselves, sometimes we can easily turn ourselves to other things. But actually, in a culture that's gone wrong, in our lives as we are, if we all lived this way, where we absolutely knew the Lord is my shepherd, our shepherd, don't you think society would be so very different? It would, wouldn't it? It'd be radically different. I once said to someone, if people obeyed even Jesus' one little teaching on forgiving one another, what a different world it would be. We wouldn't have had any world wars for a start, would we? If forgiveness had been at work. So, God orientation, like my polar scope at the beginning, smack bang on the pole star, as close as we possibly can be to Jesus in our lives, in our alignment and our orientation. Because you do know, we know, that when he placed his Spirit in us, we're totally one with God. Right there, reconciled to him forever. One with him. Therefore, let us work out, as Stuart said so well this morning, what we have in theory, let it be our practice. If we are one with him, let us live that way. Because that's the way to find a life of comfort, even in the hard times, because a total reliance on God surely must work. So it's about trusting him, it's about relationship, of course, shepherd and sheep, obvious. God is our only necessity in life. Jesus once said, Matthew 6:25-31, seek first his kingdom, and all these things will be added unto you as well. So, I think that's it really. That's what I've got to say. But let it be that there is something so special about us, something so real about us and our relationship with God, that actually all those people we meet, they go, there is something different about these Christians. There is something. Wouldn't it be wonderful that just by the way we are, not just how we necessarily what we say, but how we are, even especially when we've got a hard time and they see us still as Christians following God, I think that's a tremendous witness to the world. That we as people, going to people, living out the testimony of our lives in action, I think is a really important thing to do. As I said only the other Sunday, God himself came as a person because the world needed God in person. They need us to be people in person to other people. The Father sent Jesus, now he sends us. Let it be our testimony of our lives makes all the difference in the world. To God be the glory, great things he has done. Amen.